When you've just dropped points for the first time in around 2 months whilst fighting for the title, it's handy when those around you drop some as well. And if you're the Newcastle Jets, you're in dreamland this week, as everyone else who started the week inside the top 6 fails to earn 3 points as Mark Milligan's side extend their lead at the top of the table. Juan Mata goes around the world again as he scores an amazing goal in a marquee A-League fixture. Shall we just give him the Johnny Warren now? It was another crucial 6-pointer for victory, yet they give away a lead again. The only relief being Adelaide and Auckland both drop points at home to sides in the bottom 3 this league. What does it mean for the table as we head towards the run home? And the Dillies take on South Korea on Sunday night in the final game of the group stage in the Asian Cup on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Joining me today, Lachie Avil, is Christian Montegan. Christian, hello. We've just come off the back of the F1 as well, the Grand Prix in Melbourne Park. A very disastrous afternoon for Australians. Oscar Piastri not even making it to the start of the race. It kind of put a sour taste on the afternoon, but we had Auckland and Perth Glory having a quite entertaining A-League game before that to get our spirits high.
Yeah, so I think obviously Perth coming in were pretty, sort of underrated. They weren't expected to get a result, and then they were in front at one stage right in that second half against Auckland, and then somehow Auckland, get it out of the bag and get a point. But albeit Newcastle obviously have that handy, I think it's a 4-point lead now at the top, so things are looking very good for them. Obviously they're in pole position to finish top, obviously still with a few rounds to go, but as you know in the A-League, anything is possible.
It certainly is, and it's funny, we kind of get to this early March window. We've got 2 more rounds, Jacob Stevens as well, hello to you, until we get to the international break, and then we go away and then we come back for 4 more weeks of A-League regular season football before we get into the finals. So this is just a last little spurt, and then we'll get a short rest and then come back for the final stages of this competition, where it feels like because it's been so even the whole season, things are really going to go down to the wire.
It's going to be interesting to see because you never quite know how teams are going to kind of react out of an international window with that little bit of a break. Some, would be looking forward to it and going, we get a chance to actually rest and kind of reset and gather ourselves again. But for some teams, perhaps maybe the Jets, for instance, when you're on a run like they're on, you don't want to stop playing. You just want to keep going, keep getting results and keep building your lead. So yeah, it could throw a little bit of an extra equation into it where it's, who's able to recover better, who's able to then come out of the break firing. But yeah, there's still a couple of weeks before that's even a problem. So I think for the Jets, it's just looking at if they can kind of keep this 4-point gap into that international break at the very least. I mean, you then, we talk about how it's difficult to kind of overcome a point a game gap when you've got a 4-point lead with 4 rounds left after the international break. That'll be a very strong position for the Jets in terms of actually winning the title this season. So, there's a couple of little things still to come, but they're definitely looking in a very strong position at the moment, Newcastle. And there'll be some teams, like I said, who will be looking at that international break as a chance to actually kind of gather themselves a little bit. It's been a crazy schedule over this kind of middle of the summer period, and it's going to really start to come to a head now. So it's super exciting, and the fact that there's still kind of everything to play for across the table. We've seen some gaps kind of opening up in some groups. There's kind of a top 4 group. There's kind of these guys that are in the hunt for the 6 and things like that, but it's still so tight within those groups that realistically you can't say for sure that a team is going to finish in the position that they're in at the moment. So yeah, there's a whole lot more to come over the next 8 weeks of football.
So here's where we're at the conclusion of this round. So the Mariners and Melbourne City still have a game in hand, but apart from that, everyone else has played 20 games of a 26 match league season. As I said, the Jets are the only team who started this week inside the top 6, and I'm counting the Bulls in that as well from the Mariners game midweek to earn 3 points. They've extended a gap on all of those teams, which, as Christian said, leaves a 4-point margin to Auckland, who, of course, had that draw with Perth on Sunday afternoon. The big thing for the Newcastle Jets, talking specifically about the title race, this next 2 weeks is going to decide, in my opinion, who wins the A-League Premiership, because they have Auckland's next week and then Sydney FC. So they are their 2 nearest rivals that the Jets will play over the course of the next 2 weeks. If they win those 2 games, it'll be a minimum of 7 points clear of any competition with 4 to play, which means that on any given weekend in the final month of the A-League, the Newcastle Jets could win the A-League Premier's Plate. So, Christian, these next 2 weeks are really where it's at when we're talking about the top end, the final spaces and the jostling. That'll all go down right to the final week of the season, right? But for the Newcastle Jets, Auckland FC and then Sydney FC, your 2 nearest rivals for the Premiership, this is it. This is the moment where you got to play your best football, because if you win these games, that's pretty much it.
This is going to be the real test, right? Because we've seen over the course of this season, we've praised the Jets, the work that Milligan's done. But if you can't get the job done in these next 2 games, then it's sort of a bit of like, okay, what could have been, right? You've done all this work leading up to it. These are the moments that you play for. These are the moments that Milligan has been, telling his team, okay, boys, if we want to win the league, if we want to go deep, if we want to actually win the championship, you have to beat these sorts of teams, our competitors, our main rivals. And so obviously Sydney and Auckland will be up for it at the same time, which is why both of them will be cracking games. I think the Jets probably need to win maybe one and even draw one. I think that's enough for me to say, okay, yep, the Jets will win it. Albeit, I think their last 3 or 4 after that, they've got Victory, MacArthur, and then they've got the F3 Derby, I believe, in the final fixture. So it's like the Jets have an easy run in. Because Victory and MacArthur, they're still both fighting for finals as well to stay in that top 6. And then you've got F3 Derbies and F3 Derby, right? And I think the Mariners are still fighting to get into the top 6 as well. So no game from here on out is going to be easy. But for the Jets to be in this position where they can actually afford to even lose a game against either Sydney or Auckland it's quite an achievement itself, right? I forgot where we all placed the Jets before the season, our ladder predictions, but we obviously
I think I had them last.
No, did you actually?
Last or something.
Oh, goodness.
I think I had them in the bottom 4, yeah.
Really? I forgot where I put them, maybe mid-table or something, because I was impressed pre-season what Milligan was doing with this group, obviously coming off the back of the Australia Cup win. But no one would have thought that they would have been doing this well. And so let's just hope for their sake that they can, keep the momentum up, because it only takes one loss, right, for the wheels to start falling off potentially. I know they dropped points last week against the Mariners, and they obviously bounced back with a win against the Wanderers from a come from behind. But you lose to Sydney and Auckland all of a sudden. It's like it sort of plants that seed of doubt in your mind that, okay, you just start to second guess yourself a bit. If they can get at least one win, I think that'd be massive for the Jets.
It's funny when we were doing those predictions, I think we've been burnt by like cup winners in the past, more so than any club in the last few years. You've won it, like the Brisbanes, the Bulls, whatever. It's like, okay, we actually probably feel more encouraged by the Jets in terms of what they can carry through. But because we've seen a Brisbane do so poorly, we kind of underestimated them.
Yeah.
But obviously they did have that shaky start to the year, and they've come good from about the round 7 or 8 mark onwards, and just really completely blown apart the competition. Do you think this game against the Wanderers, though, Jacob, like what do you take away in terms of how you think they might perform in the next couple of weeks? Because it didn't feel like that typical Jets win. They weren't typical Jets goals. They were a bit more scrappy, a bit more opportunistic. The Wanderers have blown a bunch of leads in the past few weeks, and this is another one to add to that pile as well. We talk about champions teams, and even when you're playing poorly, just the ability to earn 3 points. But they're going to have to perform probably better than that if they want to really compete and win games against Sydney and Auckland in the next 2 weeks.
Yes and no. I think, going into it, if you'd have said to any Jets fan or even to any of the players or staff themselves and said, you're going to beat the Wanderers 2-1, they'd have gone, that's not great. But I think you see the way that the game plays out, going behind, that just hasn't happened like a lot recently for the Jets. They normally are the ones first on the score sheet and can kind of control the game from there. So they went behind early, and they're kind of under the pump. And like you said, it was a scrappy game. They weren't really as free flowing, playing that kind of beautiful football that we've seen from them this season. So while I think that's not a great reflection on them, I think it is a great reflection on them in the fact that they did get the result despite all of that. And okay, yes, sure, it's only against the Wanderers, and they've not been anywhere close to very good this season. They've had a couple of games where they've played all right, but realistically, for most part, teams have been looking at the Wanderers and going, we should be getting 3 points here every single day. So, it's still, there is a little bit of, I do take a little bit of salt with it, but I do think it shows a strong, squad and team mentality from the Jets to be able to grind out a result in a pretty unceremonious fashion. At home, it was a good crowd, but, it's not the kind of football the crowd was wanting to see. But at the end of the day, you take the 3 points, especially when you're in a title fight. So I think it's harsh to hold the Jets to this standard of they have to be playing a certain way. I think that it's good to see that they can get results on an off day. And I think that actually goes to show that they are arguably the strongest of those kind of three teams, if you're counting Sydney in the title race, that can really do that. I mean, Auckland have shown that a couple of times, but they've not shown what the Jets have in just dismantling opposition, right? So it's kind of
apart from the Phoenix,
apart from the Phoenix, but that's just there's some weird voodoo curse going on there. But no, the mentality seems really strong with the Jets at the moment, and this is now 10 games in a row undefeated. I think 9 of those have been wins, so it's just like it just feels like they're at a point of the season where everything is going right for them, capitalizing on things when they can, and getting these results. Okay, sure, Sydney and Auckland might pose a bit of a stronger test than the Wanderers, but I think that what this result might do is go, hang on, even if Sydney or Auckland force us to play in a different way, we can still get our result. If they're not allowing us to be as open in transition and playing these quick passing combinations through the midfield, okay, cool, we can just grind out a result still, because we know that we can do that. We've just proven that to ourselves. So I think that there's definitely positives to take away from it. It's not great to see them kind of playing that way. It sucks because they can be super entertaining, but I think from a Jets perspective, getting the 3 points there kind of in any means necessary is such a huge boost for them. And as Christian was touching on, this is a great position for them to be in now, where they can realistically, they can afford to lose to Auckland or Sydney, one of them, in the next 2 fixtures, and still have the lead in the title race. So it was ugly, but they got the job done, and at the end of the day, that's what matters in a title fight.
If there was a grand final played tomorrow, who would you guys have? Who would you back in more? Who would you trust more, Auckland or the Jets?
Tomorrow, the Jets.
The Jets.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm leaning more Auckland. In a one-off game, in a one-off grand final, I just think you mentioned, Jacob, about the Jets and how they've shown a bit more in terms of being able to win ugly, or they can just play teams off the park, which, yes, they can do both. I think, yes, Auckland probably aren't known for what the Jets are doing currently now, where they can, score a bunch of goals and they can win ugly as well, like they did against the Wanderers. But Auckland, I just think I trust them more in terms of being more organised. That's not to say the Jets aren't, because obviously they wouldn't be in the position they are now. But I just think with their experience as well, off the back of last season, playing finals, just missing out, Steve Corica, I just think is the better coach than Milligan. Right? I don't think you can argue with that. I just think Auckland right now, where they're placed with their squad, I don't know. I just had them over the Jets. Not saying it's
interesting, right? Because I mean, Lachie and I were talking about this before we started recording, and I said, it's this kind of run that the Jets are on right now. It almost feels like if they just keep winning for the rest of the season, they're going to hit the finals and they're going to lose in dramatic fashion, and it's going to be everyone going, oh, what could have been? They were on such a
which
good
we
run.
have seen in years past, like Phoenix, for example, a couple of years, right?
Yeah, we've seen it before. But it's the case of the form they're in right now, not the form they're going to be in 7-8 weeks when finals comes around, where they might find a drop off in form because they just kind of almost get complacent because they think they're going to win, and then they come up against some tough opposition in a semi-final and it falls apart for them. If it's just purely on the form they're in now, if they played tomorrow, I would back the Jets in to beat Auckland.
Interesting. Lachie?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think the Jets as well, because even as I was asking that question about the Jets and maybe not playing their best football this weekend, but still winning, it's like, well, yeah, but Auckland has just dropped points to Perth Glory as well.
Yeah.
You score early through Sam Cosgrove within the first, 10 minutes or something like that. And then a bit of loose defending allows Brian Kaltak to get free. And then the second Perth goal was actually real quality as well, to find that pass in through and get the 2-1 lead. And I don't know what was going on with the VAR review for the second Auckland goal, but they managed to get back in it. But, that's a game at home. Like, I know it's a slightly different team in Auckland this year compared to last season, but like last season, there was zero chance that they lose that game. There's been some personnel changes, we understand that. But even this year, like, Auckland don't lose those kind of games. I will say though, Lachie, usually.
Did they not lose to Perth last year? I know it was away, but maybe there's a bit of
they lost
a bogey
to Perth
team
away
situation
like a month
going
ago.
on. Yeah, that as well.
So that does exist, and that is true. But just that home ground advantage, obviously the travel, which we probably still don't talk about enough, even though it is a bit of a cliche at points. That's Auckland faltering as well, Christian. And like, I don't know, that I feel like if you're Steve Corica, you're so disappointed in that, because they set these lofty ambitions at the start of the season. There were the TIFOs. We're coming for them both in terms of the premiership and the championship. They won't both trophies and right the wrongs of last year. And then you're right in it. And Newcastle dropped points last week and you're only 2 points away. And then you drop points at home to Perth. Like that's really disappointing for them.
All that comes with pressure as well, right? Like Auckland, no one was targeting them because they're obviously a new club coming in and no one knew what to expect. Now this season, they're sort of the hunted, right? Everyone knows what to expect. And the Jets are sort of like there's no pressure on their shoulders where it's like they just all of a sudden come to the top, without much notice. And now obviously everyone's noticing. I just think by the time finals comes around, which I know wasn't my question, it was if the grand final was played tomorrow, but insane on the flip side, that's still a test in itself for the Jets, right? I just think Auckland just have the tools and the experience to be able to turn it around and just, in a one-off game, just be a bit better in terms of defensive structure, being able to see out the game. So Jets have had moments this season, losing 5-4 to MacArthur, a couple of games at the start of the season where defensively you sort of had a couple of question marks, which seemed to, for the meantime, being rectified by Milligan, but it's a long season. Obviously, it's not one tomorrow, it's one in May. So I think there's still
there'll be this exact fixture next weekend. So we'll get a little bit of a preview, I suppose, of what could be the grand final, which is going to be good fun. But I'm still backing the Jets. I'm still saying Jets.
I do like it when it's not like too close to finals as well. Like you still have an international break, you still have a month. Top two aren't going to play the first week of finals as well. Gives a little bit of breathing room before we potentially get some of those contests again. But Jacob, while we're here, let's dive into Auckland, Perth as well. In a similar vein, like obviously it's 1 point for Auckland where they probably would have been banking on 3. That is a disappointment. But how did you read the outcome of this game?
It's a tough one. This felt very un-Auckland like. Just, I think, kind of generally across the board. Getting the opening goal was great. Sam Cosgrove on the score sheet is fantastic for them. But they really just let Perth kind of play themselves into the game, if that makes sense. There didn't really seem to be an authority from Auckland to say, we're just going to kind of cruise and control the game, which is something we've spoken about. They were able to do so easily last season, right? They were able to kind of get that opening goal and then just cruise along and get the result. They just couldn't do it. Perth were just better than them for extended periods of this game. And, it's even relying on an own goal to get the equaliser, and even that was, up for VAR review or whatever. And it just is, it was very un-Auckland like. And it's a difficult one because where now do they put their sights? Do they say, we can still challenge the Jets? And I think if they beat the Jets next week, then absolutely they are right back in it. But I think at this point they're probably looking at this and going, a 4-point gap with 6 games to play it's not insurmountable, but that is a big gap, and that's going to be difficult to they
really just can't lose next week, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just they've just put more pressure on themselves. Christian's saying, they had pressure coming into this game. They're putting more pressure on themselves by not getting that result and playing poor football. And it's really disappointing because we know Auckland can be really, really good, and yet they've had these moments this season that they didn't have last season, where outside of that away loss to Perth and the 2 losses to Western, which were just kind of came out of nowhere last season. This season, it just feels like more frequently they're not playing at the level that we know that they can do. And sure, they've had some injuries to some key players. Hiroki Sakai has been missing for like most of the season and stuff like that. But you still feel like with the squad that they have, they should be able to really, kind of just glide past Perth, and they didn't do it. And so I think it's an extremely disappointing thing to see. Obviously, it's great news for Perth. Perth will be loving it. That's, probably actually Perth will be disappointed they didn't get the win, because they were, like I said, for large parts of that game, the better side. So it's disappointing, I think, for both teams, but for different reasons. And for Auckland, this next week against the Jets, there's going to be so much pressure on them heading into it. Whereas for the Jets, relatively less pressure, right? Because as Christian pointed out, they can lose and they've still got the title at the moment. Like, they'll still have a point gap. It's fine. They can kind of afford to take a few more risks because there's less for them to lose. It's just, I don't know. If it's a massive missed opportunity from Auckland. And it's been the same thing all season. Like, we're leading, and then the fact they continue to drop points in these kinds of games throughout the season allowed the Jets to come straight back through and take the top spot from them. So yeah, it's an ongoing problem for them, and I think that actually come finals, that's going to be problematic for them if they can't take these home advantage games and actually win them after scoring in the first 10 minutes. That's a death sentence for finals. So yeah, I don't know. It's not looking great for them at the moment. And while their recent form has kind of been a bit better than it was, this result reminds me a lot of that kind of middle third of the season where they were dropping points a lot. And that's a worrying sign for them.
Mm. And then on the Perth side of things, Christian, like pretty much all of these bottom six teams, really, just a win or two away from the six. And they've been on that precipice for so long because of the league scenario this year. But I brought up the stat last week about the amount of wins. It might have been the Wednesday episode or the Thursday episode, but the amount of wins in the bottom six compared to the losses in the top six in terms of the last 5 games. And that stat's been exacerbated even more this week. So from the Bulls in 7th down to the Wanderers in 12th, there is only 1 win for those 6 teams across the last 5 games for everyone, right? And that's the Wanderers, ironically, who are at the bottom of the table, that 4-0 against MacArthur. That's the only win in the last 5 games for any of those bottom 6 sides. And then there's only 2 losses for all those teams in the top 6. And that was Sydney against Adelaide and Adelaide themselves against the Jets, right? So, and that's only in like the 5th week as well. So the last 4 weeks, there's been no losses. So as much as those points, you look at the table, you look at the points numbers, everyone still looks in with a sniff. But the trend in form is so significant from the top 6 compared to the bottom 6. You show up to these games and it's like Perth Glory, you only win 1 away. Only 1 win away from the 6. We've been saying about so many teams over the last 2 months, but there's just what can you look at to give you any kind of confidence that those teams are actually going to take that opportunity and get that win to get them closer?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you can tell that there's a pack sort of moving away from that top 6 to the bottom 6. You see the cutoff with the Mariners in 6 at the moment, and we've spoken about MacArthur and their drop off and how they're just been falling off week after week, just haven't been able to click together. From there, it's like you see the table so close. It's like, yes, they're like 1 or 2 wins away from cracking into this 6, but at the same time, it's like, do they actually have the quality to beat these top sides? Like, yes, you can argue that because, like we've said in the A, like literally anything can happen, and we've seen upsets before. But it just seems like, at least especially the top 3 with the Jets, Auckland, and Sydney, it's like these teams barely slip up. When they face the bottom 6, at least this, with the past, 5-6 weeks, with that stat that you just raised, it just goes to show that you really need to take your opportunities when they come. And Perth being 2-1 up against Auckland, I know away from home, they'll take the point, but at the same time, they won't, because they know they're in such a good position. Jacob said rightly that, they probably outplayed Auckland for large parts of that match, which is really impressive considering they're a team in 10th place, they're third bottom. And to be able to match it away to a team like Auckland, who we've praised heaps, both last season and this season, it just goes to show that it can skew one way or the other. But it's just those little moments in matches where, you score that own goal, you let Auckland back into it. I think that's sort of been the story for most of these bottom sides, where they've got chances to win these games against the big sides, but they just don't capitalize when the opportunities present themselves. I think that's the small margins that we're sort of talking about this season.
All right, let's dive into the Big Blue then, shall we? Juan Mata, the headline again. What an entertaining game as a whole, but obviously kicked off the free kick, the moment. We've seen the clips. Bruno Fernandes is at it again. It was Harry Maguire as his mate in the Man United. I don't even know where they were. Some kind of
it looked like some cafe or something. It's wild to me that there's like a cafe in Manchester that's playing A-League, and then you can't find a pub here that's playing the A-League.
Well, I think it was at the training ground, right?
Maybe
like a rec area.
Yeah, okay, fair.
I think that's so, but obviously Manchester United players watching the A-League. We did this a couple of weeks ago as well, but Juan Mata just consistently seems to pull these moments out of somewhere, Jacob. I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, maybe on the predictions game for YouTube members, but is there a challenger for the Johnny Warren at the moment? Joe Lolly was flying early in the season, but he spent way too much of the season injured. I think a lot of the Jets boys are going to be pulling votes off each other. I think Louis Verstrada might get a little bit close, but you have the likes of a Jesse Randall and Lachie Brook earlier in the season as well, nicking votes at Auckland. But whenever there has been a standout player at Melbourne Victory, I feel like it's almost always been Juan Mata. And in terms of the voting system, I think he is just straight up the best player in the league as well. But is anyone even going to get close to him on the voting?
Nah. This is one of the most lopsided we've seen in a long time. To be honest, there's nobody that's even coming close to him. It just, the level of production that he's had this season has been crazy. I mean, we saw again in the derby against City where he just single-handedly won the game. But it's also, even when Victory maybe don't get the result, he's still more often than not the best player on the pitch for them. So it's one of those situations where at this point you've just got to expect it, right? You've got to expect that Juan Mata is going to have an impact one way or another, and he's probably going to prop up with a goal or an assist and just kind of change the game from there. It goes to show the caliber of player that we can still attract to the league, both in terms of stature and name, right? Like everybody knows Juan Mata, but also the fact that he is still a very, very good footballer. But it also makes you raise questions about the Wanderers and what on earth was going on there last season that he was riding the bench. I mean,
they're copping it every week.
You've got a player here who he can't stop creating chances, and you didn't use him last season. But yeah, he's been by far and away the best player in the league this season. I think that's pretty obvious for anybody to see. What's he up to now? 10 assists. I mean,
14 goal contributions.
10 assists. Yeah. It's just stupid at this rate. I mean, yeah, and he could have so many more as well. You think about all the chances that he's created that haven't been put in the back of the net. I mean, yeah, it's you're spot on that there's going to be teams where they've had some good players, but they're taking points off each other. But even then, I think even if it's, the Jets only had Clayton Taylor or Lachie Bayless or whatever, right? They still wouldn't have amassed enough to usurp Juan Mata, who has just been consistently Victory's best player all season long. So it's crazy to watch him play. It really is. Like, you just see it, and you can see it with a lot of these players when they do come here. Just they're processing things so much quicker. They're understanding the flow of the game a lot better. The vision is a step above, where they can make these kinds of passes where you go, how did he see that? Like, what, like, it's not just kind of understanding where your teammates go, and it's where the defenders are, how you can make the pass, how well weighted it needs to be. I mean, you rarely see Juan Mata, miss a pass, right? Like, it's well weighted, it's to the player, or it's in stride, or, it's those little things that you kind of take for granted watching Premier League football, that when they come here, you go, wow. Like, he's elevated the team, just with his own individual play and his ability to make those passes. So yeah, I'm firmly on the Juan Mata is winning every award this season train, because he's just been so good.
Yeah, and in terms of goal contributions as well, it's one of the best of his career. Full stop. Even in a season in the A-League as short as it is compared to European football. And he's not always been that kind of player as well. It's not like low contributions has necessarily meant that he's played bad, but we're definitely getting the output from him in the A-League, Christian. And he's only on a 1-year deal. I'd find it surprising if at this point in his career he'd sign anything other than just 1-year deals. But surely not just the name of Juan Mata, but given his effect on the field. And it's so tricky because we're at a point where the APL, maybe 6 months ago now, have publicly come out and said, okay, we want to limit the amount of money that clubs are spending on their salary rolls. But they allow one marquee player outside of that cap, and there's still PFA negotiations and everything. But surely Melbourne Victory have to be throwing the book at Juan Mata to get him to go around again.
Yeah, you have to keep him. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You see what he's done this season. And it's not even, what is he now, 37 years of age. If he stays on for another year, you think, okay, we can still get a lot out of him. But even if it's not the case, even if he does drop off a bit with age, you think maybe he can help the club in other ways in terms of maybe coaching the youth team. We've seen Bessa Barisha come back and be involved in coaching. We've seen former players come back as well. So for him to even just have that influence and that presence within the club without even playing, I think would be huge for Victory to keep him one way or the other, because he said he loves Australia, he loves the culture, he loves Melbourne. That interview he did with Suited and Booted, I think last week, about knowing everything, literally everything about Melbourne. It just goes to show that he's fallen in love with the place already, and if you can convince him to stay, even if it's sort of a few more years to be in some sort of coaching role, mentor these young kids.
He's openly said he wants to invest into A-League football. Like he's said that's something that he's
give him part of the club.
So,
I can't remember who said this, but I saw it on Twitter somewhere. It's like, give him part of Victory. Give him some equity in the club if that's what it takes to get him to hang around for a while. And if you can keep him long enough to retire here, well, then Christian, what you're talking about might just come true, because he said that his family, when it looked like Europe was off the cards, or at least England, right? It's like, all right, let's go on an adventure. Let's go to Turkey. Let's go to Japan. Let's go to Australia. If you can keep him that long and retire him here, that opens up a whole door of possibilities.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be awesome. Just to have a player of his caliber, just to be around the club, like I said, and to have that big star name, just that presence around the league in general. Again, even if he's not playing, I think it's huge for the marketing and for the product, the league in general. Victory would be absolutely foolish
and to attract
not
other
to extend
players
him
as well, right? It's
exactly.
If you've got Juan Mata as an ambassador saying how great the league is, everybody should be coming and playing here. You're going to be able to attract more and more players, especially if by all accounts he's taken a significant pay cut to play in Australia compared to what he could have earned elsewhere, which obviously makes sense considering the financial situation the league is in. But, if he can go, yeah, I did it, but it's still the best time I've had in my career, it's a great move. People should be doing it. Just even having him as an ambassador, it would be such a benefit, not just to Victory, but to the league as a whole.
You look at all the past marquees who have come here and how many have really stayed on for a long period of time. You can say Berisha, Diamante's been in a coaching role with both City and Western. There's probably a couple others that I've forgotten, but
Ninkovic.
Someone like Mata to keep him around. I think that'd just be awesome, just for the league in general. So I'll be really shocked if there's not a 1-year extension alone just for him to play, because let's not forget he could play football as well. He's head and shoulders above Johnny Warren medal. I know, so it's like we're sort of talking about him retirement already because of his age, which I think is a tad disrespectful with what he's doing at the moment. But I'm just saying long term, it'd just be great for him to stay around. It'd be good.
Get him another 2 or 3 years. Come on, he can get there. Yeah, people often say about like Lee Broxham that he was like the player that would start on the bench every season for Melbourne Victory, and then inevitably he'd just find his way into the XI at the end of the season. Even if that's Juan Mata at like 47 years old, he's just eventually finding his way into the team. I don't think many people would begrudge him that opportunity. But he had an amazing game again. But of course, the story on the pitch, at least for Melbourne Victory, was that this was a very, very important game, and they've blown a 2-goal lead. And I think particularly, Jacob, it's interesting to consider this in terms of a 2-week block as well, just like the Jets, how they're going into their run against Auckland and Sydney. Victory have played Adelaide and Sydney in back-to-back weeks, hold leads in both of them, both teams that are around about the same totals on the table. So those kind of 6-pointer matches that really, really matter in terms of, are you hosting an elimination final? Are you getting closer to the top 2 and skipping the first week? And Victory have let their opponents off the hook on both of those occasions, and it only took 3 minutes in this game. They looked really, really solid and scored their 2 goals. And then, my view of the first goal, Roderick Miranda, I think is the one that lets his marker go a little bit, and Stammer just gets those extra couple of meters in the box, and Ben Grucho puts it on a platter for him. And then I can't blame the player at all, but Santos at left back seems like a very, very peculiar decision. I know, obviously, they've lost Davidson, personal reasons, stepping away from the club for a little bit, but Santos did not feel to me like the right option, and he got caught out a number of times, and they could have lost the game because of it as well. But then the ball goes in behind, and Sydney do what they do, and they scored the equaliser. And it's just those key moments in the last couple of weeks that Victory have struggled to put away, and this is really, at the end of these 2 weeks, is an opportunity missed for them, and they still find themselves teetering on that edge of finals where they could have been in quite a safer position.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that realistically they had very strong opportunities to win both of their last 2 games, and that would put them on quick math says 33 points, and they'd have jumped both Sydney and Adelaide up into 3rd spot. Like it's really quite crazy, the fact that they haven't been able to convert either of these 2, and I think particularly this Big Blue one, because going 2 up. And it felt like in that first half in complete control. And you said quite rightly, it was just took 2-3 minutes to completely change the game. But I think that's kind of always been the problem for Victory this season, is that they're prone to having those moments where they open up, and whether it's a defensive thing or they make a mistake elsewhere on the pitch, it kind of leads to things happening, and then that changes the kind of discourse we have around the game from a place where it should be Victory probably winning that game 2-0 to Victory of drop points, and it's 2-2, and it's defensive errors, and it's Roderick Miranda with another mistake, and it's a player playing kind of out of position. I'm not sure if Santos has he played left back at all this season.
Definitely
for
not a Victory.
So it's just it's these things, and you point at them and you go, what are you thinking? Like, you're in a really good position now. I mean, with that win, they would have jumped Adelaide up into the top 4 and been in a position to host an elimination final. So it's all these things that you just go, what are you doing, guys? Like, come on, like you're 2-0 up, lock in and see the game out. I mean, you credit Sydney for taking the chances that they did and not wasting the mistakes that Victory made, but it's the fact that we're always talking about Victory blowing games because of mistakes they've made. It's very rarely because a team kind of steps up and is able to push them and perform to their level. I mean, we saw in the derby a few weeks ago, right, that they can be a very, very strong side, and if they don't make mistakes, it's a pretty clear win for them most weeks. But when they do make those mistakes, it allows teams back into the game, and that's what we saw here. So, I was saying for Auckland, it's a worrying sign coming into finals. For Victory, it's a worrying sign for them. I still think they'll make finals because they have a 4-point gap on anybody else that's outside of the 6. But, they're probably at this stage looking at playing away in an elimination final. And that's not something that Victory has ever had to do very often. I mean, they're normally, if they're playing an elimination final, they're normally hosting it.
They did beat the Wanderers last year.
They did beat the Wanderers last year. Yeah, but it's not something that happens frequently for them. They're normally in the top 4. It's a different story for them. So yeah, this is just crazy that Victory. I mean, maybe it's not crazy, right? Because we're saying every team basically is failing to capitalize outside of the Jets. Every team is failing to capitalize on the chances that they get. Auckland dropping points to Perth. We'll talk about Adelaide dropping points to Wellington. Victory dropping points to Sydney. Like, it's just, it seems like we're in that phase of the season now where we're getting a lot of these kind of 6-pointers, and it ends in a draw, and we see a lot of teams that kind of going to be, ruining the opportunity to have not taken 3 points. And Victory, having lost 4 points in the last 2 weeks from winning positions as well. That's a really big blow. That's a tough one, and that's going to hurt. And they've played good football, but it's just one moment or 2 moments here or there throughout these games that keeps coming back to hurt them. They really, really need to figure out what's going on there, because it can't keep happening for them. If it does, they won't get very far in finals. I'll put it that way, because
I think I think it's also the lack of tactical versatility that Dillis has, right? I think we've spoken about this the last week or the week before, where it comes to these moments, you're 2-0 up, you're playing in Sydney. I know that they don't have a centre-back on the bench. It's not ideal, right? You don't have that extra option to bring an extra centre-back on, but you look at that first goal that Victory conceded where Miranda lost his man, Esposito's left exposed. You put an extra body there, that probably doesn't happen. You have an extra body to clear the ball. You're playing 5 at the back. Get a bit of extra cover for Santos, who has been struggling, throughout most of the game, who was obviously at fault as well for the second goal being out of position a bit. I know, again, at the same time, like I said before, he doesn't have that personnel on the bench to turn to in terms of a centre-back to bring on, but it's just...
Well, it's in Sarah, right? Because he came on for Roddy really late in the game after he got injured. Like, even if he's playing out of position at a left back or something, like, surely from a defensive perspective at 2-0, rather than having the winger at left back, having a centre back, right back kind of player out of position in a defensive position is surely better.
And I think it was Insera who came on for Miranda. I think it was like 5 minutes ago.
Yes,
So it's like, why wouldn't you make that change when you were 2-0 up or 5 minutes after you scored that second goal? It's like he's just making these decisions on the fly, or at least a bit too late. And it's like, well, it's already 2-0. You're sort of making a like-for-like change almost. This is where I sort of question Dillis a bit when it comes to, his substitutions and the way he manages games. And you just can't afford to lose, a 2-0 lead. You just can't. With the table this close, that's the one real concern I have for Victory, is how they close out games when they do have the lead. And what Dillis does, right? How does he, change his approach on the fly? It feels like he's a bit too one-dimensional. I'd say I just want to see a bit more flexibility from him. And it's hard as a coach sometimes.
I think it's a case. It might even be a case of like he's got a plan A, and a lot of the time this season that plan A has worked. They've scored. They've gone ahead. In this case, they've scored twice. And it's kind of that aversion to changing what's worked, I think, might be a little bit of what plays into it, of going, oh, well, we're 2-0 up playing this way. It doesn't make sense to change the way that we're playing and then risk something happening. And everybody goes, oh, why did you change the way we were playing? So I think maybe that might play into it a little bit. But
that's
also...
that's because you're not doing it much, though, right? It's because he's stuck in his one way. If you're doing that in pre-season, if you're trying different things, then obviously, okay, you've got that up your sleeve where you go, okay, I can turn to this if we've got 2-0 lead. You can play with 3 centre-backs. But obviously, if they haven't done it much or before, ever, it's like you can't really turn to it.
I think, like, the substitutions, they just all feel very pre-planned and not really reacting to the game state. We saw it last week against Adelaide, just the raft of changes in the front third. All of a sudden, like the passing, they're trying to go in behind heaps with through balls and they just weren't coming off at all. There was no connection there. And I know this is actually the hypocritical game to talk about this because Charles Nduka scored with his first touch. But I like just the 60, 65th minute substitutions between Nikos and Nduka every game just makes no sense to me. Like you got to back someone to have their impact. I know he's trying to keep players happy, but it just doesn't feel conducive. And then, like you're clearly putting Claris Mario at left back as a stopgap because you don't have a good option. He's clearly going to be more attacking minded than he is defensive minded. So at 2-0, why don't you just take that risk out of it and put on someone like Insaro? That's what I would do. But I don't know. At the end of the day, they're down 2-0. As Sydney recover, Jacob, and they're another team. Obviously at home, they would have wanted to go into this and then claim the 3 points, but they're almost just stuck in this holding pattern. Like they've won, 2 games in a row, 1-0. It's been tight. They haven't really had too much free-flowing football. And to be 2-0 down and then get back to 2-2 is a good point from that perspective. But it's just so much of this season.
In the first place.
Exactly.
Like you don't want to have that fight back. You don't want to have to rely on Victory to make mistakes because that's realistically what happened, right? Victory makes a couple of mistakes and Sydney score from that. So it was actually, I think, a disappointing performance from Sydney. All things considered, yes, a home Big Blue. Obviously, it was the Cove's 20th anniversary, and they had that massive tifo for it, which looked fantastic. And kind of the vibes were there of this being a big occasion. And it's the fact they were reliant on their opposition making mistakes to get back into the game. And that kind of irked me a little bit because this is a team that if they want to really challenge for anything this season, I think they're out of the title. In terms of the premiership fight, I think they're out of it at this point. I don't see them coming back to do it. I think even if they beat the Jets in a couple of weeks, I still think it's a very, very long shot for them to achieve it. But if they want to actually go on and win the championship in the final series, you can't be relying on your opposition to make mistakes. You've got to be able to take the initiative yourself. And we haven't seen that from Sydney recently. Yes, they've got a couple of wins, but they've been really tight wins. They've not actually kind of played the opposition off the park, which you would expect from a team that's looking to win silverware this season. So it's disappointing for Sydney to come into this occasion with a massive opportunity and to go 2-0 down. And I mean, look, you can't really hate too much on that Juan Mata free kick. Was just, nobody's ever stopping that, right? Like that's always going to be a goal. But, to concede again early in the second half and, it just kind of, it left a bit of a sour taste in the mouth, to be honest. I think that they can be a much better side than they showed. It's more disappointing for Victory because they were 2-0 up to drop those points. But I think the fact that Sydney, had to fight back and could only fight back because Victory made mistakes, that's a really bad look for them. So I don't know. It's probably just a case of, it's a rivalry game. This kind of things happen. You just shake it off. You take the point and move forwards. But, as we get closer to finals, we're kind of overanalyzing everything into what it means for their chances moving forwards. And you just, in a vacuum, it's not a great look.
So I just want to up the stakes as well for this third position. So even if you were to rule out Sydney from the premiership race, which is probably not an unfair assumption, right? 7 points, that's a fair way to climb in 6 matches. This battle between Sydney FC, Adelaide United and Melbourne Victory for third position could have an Asian spot on the line. So if you've watched the video that we posted last week, you'll know about this. But there's 2 ways that this could happen. We're still unclear if the Jets... Well, I mean, if we're ruling Sydney out of the premiership, then the Jets are going to finish 1 or 2 and earn the ACL elite spot. So they're very likely going to go into there. They already have the ACL 2 spot thanks to their cup win. What happens to that spot? There's rumours that FA are talking to Heidelberg. I believe late March is the cutoff for Football Australia to make that decision. So it could either go to Heidelberg or the next based Aussie-based team, which would be third place. The other way that this could happen, and I've updated news on this, so... I think I've mentioned a couple of times in the podcast before, Malaysia, they essentially falsified a bunch of birth documents. It was much more serious than I think a lot of people originally realised in terms of getting players naturalised to play for the national team and then won friendlies and Asian Cup qualifiers as well. They've been charged by FIFA. They've gone through appeals. Their final appeal at the Court of Arbitration for Sport a couple of days ago, there was a couple of little leniency things granted, but essentially the appeal was tossed out. So the players can still train rather than be banned from football entirely, but they still can't play. And the AFC throughout this whole process have said that they're going to wait for all those appeals to finish in terms of then thinking about what their punishment for Malaysia is going to be. And that has to happen before the end of this month because that's when the final Asian Cup qualifiers are played. So the next couple of weeks, we're going to learn the punishments. And it is my understanding that one of the likely punishments for that is that Malaysian clubs would be kicked out of AFC competition and Malaysia's AFC 2 spot would fall to Australia. So there are 2 different ways that third place in the league in Australia, Christian, could earn a team a spot into the AFC Champions League 2. So this is massive. We've talked about the financial opportunities in Asia for Australian clubs. Even if you're not top 1, top 2, in that kind of finals positioning conversation, third in this league could still be massive this year. So for clubs like Sydney, Adelaide and Victory have all had to split the points this week. This is a very crucial month and a half to go as well.
For sure, and it makes you play for a bit more, right? There's an extra incentive that, okay, third place actually means something more, right? Potentially, to get that extra money, potentially playing in Asia. It's really exciting. But again, it's sort of that race down to 3rd to 5th, Sydney, Adelaide, Victory. If I had to choose someone now, it'd have to be Sydney, just because Adelaide and Victory at the moment, I trust the least, to be perfectly honest. I know Sydney had, they've had probably up and down form for the past few weeks, and that result against Victory wasn't good enough at home to be 2-0 down. Yes, bring it back to 2-2, but, for a side like Sydney, who had a near disastrous campaign last year, not making finals, you'd expect them to be there or thereabouts for the whole season this time around. They have sort of been there to an extent. Before it was Auckland and Sydney, before the Jets came into the equation. But now, obviously, it seems like they're fighting for third. And I just think in this current period of time, Sydney, I just trust the most. I don't know how to explain it, but I see Adelaide and Victory dropping more points. I just don't see how Adelaide find that consistency to be toe to toe with Sydney for the next 6 rounds to go. I just don't see it. Victory maybe, but 4 points behind. It's still a big margin, right? With still a few rounds to go. So Sydney in the driver's seat. But again, it's going to come down as well to that game against Newcastle for Sydney, which I think is going to be massive. And that's going to be the real test to see where they're at as well.
All right, well, Jacob, let's talk about one of the reasons why Christian might not feel so hot about Adelaide United, because they dropped points to the Wellington Phoenix on Friday night. Again, another one of these top teams at home dropping points. Lachie Avil almost did a little bit too much again after rounding the keeper, but thankfully put it in the back of the net, and it was required after the early set piece that allowed Wellington to get the lead.
Yeah, this one is nothing short of pretty awful from Adelaide, to be honest. I just had a quick look then. They accumulated 1.9 XG in this game, which felt about right. There were a lot of really good chances, and it was, again, just awful finishing for Adelaide that really killed it. And it's been a running theme this season. And it's not just been Luka Jovanovic who's missed chances. It's been Yaya Dakuli. It's been even Craig Goodwin has missed a few opportunities. It's been, wasteful shots from midfielders, that kind of thing. And it just builds up over a season to get to a point where, okay, you've not just, it's not just a couple of results. It's now, this is the running thing of when Adelaide aren't getting a result, it's because they're not putting the ball in the back of the net. The rest of the team is doing enough to get them into that position. The build-up play that Adelaide have been doing this season has been awesome to watch. It's so fun when they're playing through teams, and even in this game against Wellington, the midfield absolutely dominated and were just playing passes for fun, but the ball gets into the final third and it just immediately falls apart. The ball doesn't end up in the back of the net. It's the wrong decision. They take too long to make a decision. It's there's so many combinations of things. They're offside. Yaya Dakuli was offside 4 or 5 times in this game. It's just it's these simple things from the attacking third that aren't happening for Adelaide, and that's why, Christian, you shouldn't have any confidence in Adelaide to be consistent moving forwards, because they just can't put the ball in the back of the net this season. I say that, okay, they've tied second most goals scored this season, but they could be rivaling the Jets at this point in time had they converted some of these relatively simple chances that they haven't done. And they'd also be rivaling the Jets in terms of points as well, because it would have turned a lot of draws into wins and a lot of losses into draws. So it's incredibly frustrating from an Adelaide perspective to continue to see this happening, because that's not been the case. It's always, the last few seasons for Adelaide has been, they've put the ball in the back of the net plenty of times, but they're conceding 4 a game as well. It's actually stamped kind of a lot of that out this season. The defending has been a bit better. Set pieces are still a problem, which is obviously, as you said, Lachie, what they conceded in this one. But defending has been a lot better. Josh Smits has had a great season between the sticks as well. It's been the attackers that can't put the ball in the back of the net. It's great to see Luka get that goal, and I think had he missed that, his mental, that would be,
he would have been busy on Facebook this week.
He would have been through the floor, and it was really, really good to see him score that, because you could just see from his reaction that was just like a weight off his shoulders, like, yes, I've done it. Okay, good. Like, I've put it in the back of the net. And this is, he scored 7 goals this season as well. He's been one of the best number 9s in terms of goal output this season. But it's just, this was a disappointing result. Wellington, I don't think played all that well. It really was, that set piece was about the only chance they had. There were a couple of moments in transition, but they just knocked it straight to the keeper. Adelaide really have to do a lot better than they did. There were points in that game where Wellington did not touch the ball for 5 or 6 minutes in a row, and Adelaide only ended up scoring once. So I think that, Ayrton needs to have a long look at the front 3 that has been being rolled out in recent weeks and say, do we need to make some changes to that to make sure that we're able to capitalise when we start games strong, score early, and not be in this position where we're fighting for a point rather than fighting for the win. So it's a consistency issue from the front 3, and that's not what you want. Really heading into finals, you want to be able to score goals, and just holding on for a 0-0 draw in a final doesn't matter, because it's then going to go to extra time. It's then going to go to penalties. If you can't put the ball in the back of the net, you're not going to win. So it's worrying signs. I don't think it's full panic stations, but it's been a noticeable problem for Adelaide continually this season. So I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed, whether it's a change of personnel, a change of approach, whatever. They need to do something to get the ball in the back of the net a bit more frequently.
In an era of football, Christian, where data scouting is so significant, sports betting, fantasy competitions, things like that, it is very, very important to accurately label the correct goal scorer of a goal, right? And what that's led to is one of my favorite things in football nowadays, where someone's got one of those slight touches, i.e. Manrika James, and the person who has scored the goal later to find out they've actually assisted the goal, i.e. Corbin Piper, just goes so heavy in a celebration, just completely unaware that they are not the one to score the goal. It's an enjoyable situation in football. Just makes you laugh.
It does, yeah. It's one of those ones where, it's sort of left a bit red-faced a bit. You turn back to who was a Karen Bullitt a few years back when he scored the offside goal and he celebrated for like 5 minutes, and it's like, hold on, mate, you haven't scored. I know this is a bit different, but it sort of brings you those sort of similar vibes, in a sense. So it's peak A-League moment, I guess. It's one of those.
The funniest thing though is live, I didn't think that it had taken a deflection, so I can understand why Corbin Piper as well, especially if you've ever headed a ball, you kind of just head it and you're not necessarily always looking directly at where the ball travels off your head and things like that. So I can fully understand why he's gone for the celebration. But watching it in slow motion, it is a relatively significant deflection to the point where it does kind of change Smitz's approach to it, because he's moving across to his left because that's the direction the ball's traveling in off of Piper's head, and it kind of hits like the shoulder neck area of James, right, and moves back across him a little bit. It's significant enough. I think if had it come off a defender, it's not called an own goal, but it's one of those intricacies of football, right, where if it's come off an attacking player, you have to credit them with the goal regardless of how little a touch they actually got on it.
Wasn't there one earlier in the season? It was either Sam Cosgrove, the assist, or the goal the other way around, where he's like kicked it into Jesse Randall's foot as he's lying on the ground, and it's just gone into the goal. It's like that's a deflection as well, but it's a touch by the attacker. Last touch off this player gets the goal, even though they're just lying on the floor.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Crazy how football works in those ways. There are 4 games of A-League. We're not going to talk. We're recording before the Matildas play South Korea on Sunday night. Go check out the Dubcast. There's been daily episodes all the way through the Asian Cup tournament. It's getting serious now. Of course, the Matildas are through to the knockout stage, but you'll know the result as you're listening to this. But this is the most critical game and will be the most competitive, and then we're into the knockout phase. So go to Tilly's, check out the Dubcast to keep up to date with the tournament. In terms of looking forward, the other thing that we have to look out for, Christian, is Melbourne City in the Champions League during the week. Finished 1-1 after the first leg against Burim United. We need a win. We need to progress, not just for City to get to this final 8, but also for the coefficient. This is our last chance. If City progress, we go above China this year and earn an extra spot. If City don't progress through any means, even if they get a draw and don't get it through extras or penalties, we'll have to wait another year. So lots at stake. Hopefully the boys can go get it done in Thailand.
Yeah, obviously that last minute equaliser last week, or this week as time of recording, helped, to get it to 1-1, because travelling away from home with the 1-0 deficit would have been tough, right? But at the same time, it probably would have given Vidmar a bit more incentive to attack. It'll be interesting to see how he approaches this game from the get-go. Does he try and keep it tight for the first half and then try to play a bit more in the second half? I just think the way he organises his squad, tactically, and the players he chooses is going to be obviously key for their chances to progress. But they've shown this campaign in Asia that they're more than capable of beating some of these top sides and to progress through, not only for the coefficient, but for them, for a club as well, to really make a statement and say, look, we've invested so much resources and money into this club, and to make the next stage of the ACL Elite would be a massive step forward for a club who obviously won the championship in the A-League last year. This would be another level for the club. So hopefully, for Australian football's sake, they can get the job done. Fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Now, there is an extra layer to Asian football at the moment. Obviously, with the conflict in the Middle East, things have been quite difficult. All of the games in the Champions League for Western teams have been postponed. So we won't know, by the time we know all the participants from the East, we won't know who from the West is playing. There is also the issue of hosting. So Saudi Arabia is supposed to host this like final 8 centralized, competition of the top 8 ACL elite teams. Obviously they have been involved. I believe they have had conflict actually in Saudi Arabia, some of the maybe a US base or something like that. The Saudi Pro League is continuing as we're recording. It is being played. There were games earlier today. There is a lot of uncertainty about what's going on in that area of the world. Of course, I was thinking, like, obviously there's so much in the world going on, but from a football perspective, I would hope there is someone at Football Australia exploring the possibility of what happens if Saudi Arabia can't host that competition. Because under the age of James Johnson as CEO, there was definitely interest from Australia in terms of hosting this top 8 final series. And you've also got a men's international Asian Cup being played at the start of next year. So I just wonder, in terms of hosting these tournaments, what's being considered at the moment. But we'll have to wait and see. Wait for hopefully the City boys to get the job done during the week, and then we can have all those discussions afterwards. But that'll do it for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thank you all very much for listening at home. Christian, thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob.
Cheers, Lachie.
Thank you very much for your company. Plenty of Asian Cup content throughout the week to come, of course, as Melbourne City as well. And then we'll head into our second last week before the international break as well. Socceroos matches on the horizon at the end of this month. it's all very exciting. But thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.